In August 1977, the Hodgson family, consisting of single mother Peggy Hodgson and her 4 children, moved into a modest council house at 284 Green Street in Enfield, London. Peggy, a hard-working woman struggling to provide for her family, hoped for a fresh start. However, within days of settling in, strange disturbances began. Small at first, but growing into something terrifying. What started as unexplained knocking sounds escalated into furniture moving on its own, objects flying across rooms, and, most disturbingly, 11-year-old Janet Hodgson appearing to be the center of it all. The story of the Enfield poltergeist would go on to become one of the most documented and controversial paranormal cases in history, drawing in paranormal investigators, skeptics, and even the media. The first signs. It began one quiet evening when Peggy heard a loud thud from the bedroom where Janet and her younger brother Johnny slept. Rushing upstairs, she found them cowering under their blankets. "The dresser moved on its own," Janet whispered, her voice trembling. Peggy dismissed it as childish imagination and pushed the dresser back. But the moment she turned away, it slid forward again, this time with a force that sent Peggy stumbling backward. A chill ran down her spine. She grabbed the children and rushed to the neighbor's house. Vic and Peggy Nottingham, their neighbors, agreed to check the house. Vic, a large-built man, strode in confidently, only to come running out moments later, his face pale. "The bloody thing knocked back at me," he muttered, refusing to go back inside. The haunting escalates. Soon, the disturbances grew more aggressive. Bed sheets were yanked off the children at night. Toys flew across rooms and loud knocking echoed through the walls. The most horrifying phenomenon was Janet herself. She would wake up screaming, her body levitating above the bed. Sometimes she spoke in a deep, guttural voice that wasn't her own. "I am Bill," the voice once growled. "This is my house." Peggy, terrified, called the police. An officer arrived and personally witnessed a chair slide across the floor. Yet, as she noted in her report, no human force seemed to be involved. Media attention and paranormal investigators. As word spread, the Daily Mirror sent journalists to investigate. They too experienced the phenomena firsthand, one even getting hit by a flying Lego brick. Their reports caught the attention of paranormal investigators, Maurice Gross and Guy Lyon Playfair, who soon took an interest in the case. Maurice, a member of the Society for Psychical Research, set up cameras and audio recorders throughout the house. Over several weeks, they captured chilling evidence: Janet levitating and being thrown across the room, furniture moving on its own, strange voices coming from Janet, speaking in Old English dialects, objects disappearing and reappearing in impossible places. One recording captured Janet's deep, demonic voice saying, "I was once a man, I died here, and now I will never leave." Even skeptics struggled to explain how an 11-year-old girl could produce such a voice without damaging her vocal cords. Skepticism and controversy. Despite overwhelming evidence, some accused the Hodgsons of faking the events. A few incidents seemed suspicious, like Janet being caught bending spoons or throwing objects. However, both Gross and Playfair believed the activity was too consistent and violent to be a hoax. Even skeptic magician James Randi admitted that, while some parts could have been staged, other aspects of the case defied explanation. The possession. As weeks turned into months, Janet's condition worsened. She would convulse violently, her eyes rolling back. At times, the strange voice spoke through her for hours. One evening, a cross placed on her bedside table bent on its own, and an unseen force dragged Janet across the floor. Morris decided an exorcism was the only option. A priest was called in, but as soon as he began the ritual, Janet screamed and fell unconscious. For 3 days, she remained unresponsive. When she awoke, the voice was gone, and the disturbances significantly lessened. The aftermath. By 1979, the haunting had mostly ceased. Janet, exhausted and traumatized, slowly returned to normal life. She later revealed that, while some events were exaggerated, many of the horrors were real. Years later, Janet admitted, "It stayed with me. Even now, I sometimes feel it watching me." The house still stands today. Though new residents report no supernatural activity, visitors often claim to feel an unsettling presence, as if something unseen still lingers within its walls. On November 13th, 1974, the DeFeo family was brutally murdered in their home at 112 Ocean Avenue, Amityville, New York. Ronald DeFeo Jr., the eldest son, shot and killed his parents and 4 siblings as they slept. His explanation? "Voices told me to do it." 1 year later, George and Kathy Lutz, along with their 3 children, moved into the same house, believing they had found their dream home. They lasted only 28 days before fleeing in terror. What happened inside that house remains one of the most disturbing paranormal cases ever documented. The first signs of horror. The Lutz family moved in on December 18th, 1975. The house, a Dutch colonial with large windows and a boathouse, seemed perfect. But on their first night, the atmosphere felt oppressive. The family dog, Harry, refused to enter the house, barking and growling at something unseen. George, a rational man, dismissed it. "Just a new place. The dog will get used to it." But by the third night, strange occurrences began. The temperature inside the house dropped to freezing, even with the heating on. Unseen footsteps echoed in the hallways at night. Doors and windows slammed shut on their own. The most unsettling event was the smell, a nauseating stench of rotting flesh that came and went without explanation. The evil presence. Kathy began to wake up with deep scratches on her body, as if something clawed at her in her sleep. George, who had never been religious, became obsessed with the fireplace. He sat before it for hours, barely eating, growing pale and distant. He also noticed something disturbing. His appearance began to change. His skin turned gray, and his eyes seemed sunken. "I feel like I'm becoming someone else," he told Kathy one night. Then came the voices, soft whispers at first, then full sentences, then laughter. At 3:15 a.m. every night, the exact time the DeFeo murders occurred, George would wake up, overcome by a feeling of rage, the demon of Amityville. One night, their daughter Missy, only 5 years old, told Kathy about her new friend Jody. "Jody says we can play forever." At first, they assumed it was an imaginary friend, until Missy pointed out the window and whispered, "There she is." George turned and saw 2 glowing red eyes staring back at him. The house attacks. By the 3rd week, the house turned violent. A crucifix on the wall twisted upside down. Slime oozed from the walls. Kathy levitated above her bed, screaming. On January 14th, 1976, George woke up to a deafening roar. The house seemed alive. Windows shattered, doors banged, the walls vibrated. A voice screamed, "Get out!" That was the final straw. The Lutz family grabbed their belongings and fled, never looking back. Aftermath: a house cursed forever. The Lutzes never returned. Paranormal investigators, including Ed and Lorraine Warren, later concluded that the house contained a powerful demonic presence. Despite skepticism, the case remains one of the most terrifying hauntings in history. The house still stands today, but no one ever stays for long. In the early 19th century, the Bell family of Adams, Tennessee, found themselves at the center of one of the most terrifying hauntings in American history. It started with strange noises, knocking, scratching, and whispers in the dark. Then, something spoke. A sinister voice tormented them for 4 years, revealing itself as a malicious entity known as the Bell Witch. The haunting escalated to violence, leading to the mysterious death of John Bell, the family patriarch. To this day, locals say the witch never left. The first signs. The Bell family had lived peacefully on their farm until 1817, when John Bell noticed a strange creature lurking in the cornfield. It had the body of a dog and the head of a rabbit. John shot at it, but it vanished. That night, the noises began. Scratching inside the walls, footsteps pacing outside, whispers in the dead of night. At first, they thought it was rats, but then the whispers formed words. The witch speaks. By 1818, the entity became stronger. It pulled blankets off the children at night. It slapped and pinched young Betsy Bell. It mimicked family members' voices. One night, it laughed. Then it spoke. I am the Bell Witch. The haunting intensifies. The voice became louder, crueler, smarter. It mocked John Bell, calling him Old Jack. It sang hymns in the middle of the night. It predicted the future with eerie accuracy. Word spread, and curious visitors came to witness the witch. To their horror, the entity recognized them by name and revealed their deepest secrets. The attack on Betsy Bell. Betsy, John's daughter, suffered the worst. The witch pulled her hair, slapped her face, and choked her in her sleep. Whenever she tried to marry her fiancé, Joshua Gardner, the entity would scream and threaten them. Eventually, Betsy broke off the engagement, and the attacks lessened. The death of John Bell. John Bell's health declined mysteriously. His throat swelled. He suffered from violent seizures. His face became twisted in agony. On December 20th, 1820, he was found dead in bed. Next to him, a small bottle of black liquid. The witch laughed. I gave old Jack his medicine, she said. When a drop of the liquid was given to a cat, it died instantly. The witch's promise. After John's death, the entity grew quieter, eventually leaving in 1821. But before vanishing, it made a promise. I will return in 107 years. In 1935, eerie events resumed in Adams, Tennessee. Even today, the area around the Bell Witch Cave is said to be cursed. In 1974, the Smurl family moved into a duplex in West Pittston, Pennsylvania, hoping for a fresh start. What they found instead was a nightmare. For over 15 years, they were tormented by an unseen force, one that whispered in the dark, moved objects, and physically attacked them. It wasn't just a ghost. It was something darker, something evil. The first signs of terror. Jack and Janet Smurl were an ordinary couple, raising their 4 daughters in their new home. The first strange occurrences were minor. A foul smell filled the house like rotting meat. Furniture moved on its own. Their dog whimpered, refusing to enter certain rooms. Then, things escalated. The TV exploded into static, even when unplugged. Deep scratches appeared on walls overnight. The house was always freezing, even in summer. By 1977, the Smurls lived in fear. The demon reveals. Itself at night, whispers echoed through the walls. Soft at first, then louder, then growling. Janet saw dark shadows moving in the hallway. Jack heard guttural voices saying his name. One night, while Janet folded laundry, she felt a presence behind her. Then, a hand grabbed her neck. She gasped for air, feeling ice-cold fingers tighten around her throat. Then, it was gone. The attacks become violent. By the early 1980s, the entity had become more aggressive. Doors slammed shut on their own. Demonic laughter echoed through the house. The bed shook violently at night. Then, it attacked Jack. One night, as he lay in bed, he felt paralyzed. A dark figure climbed on top of him, pressing his chest down. It spoke in a voice not of this world. You belong to me. Jack struggled to move, but the pressure grew stronger. Then, just as suddenly, it vanished. The exorcism. Desperate, the Smurls called Ed and Lorraine Warren, famous paranormal investigators. Lorraine, a clairvoyant, sensed a dark presence immediately. This is not just a ghost, she warned. This is a demon. A priest attempted an exorcism, but it failed. The attacks continued, stronger than before. Janet was thrown across the room by an invisible force. Jack saw red eyes staring at him from the ceiling. They had no choice. They moved out in 1987. But the demon? It followed them. Aftermath. The haunting never ends. Even after priests blessed their new home, Jack and Janet still heard whispers. The entity never truly left. To this day, the Smurl haunting remains one of the most disturbing paranormal cases ever recorded. The Demon House of Gary, Indiana. In the quiet city of Gary, Indiana, A house stood on Carolina Street that would soon gain notoriety as one of the most terrifying cases of paranormal activity in modern history. This was the home of LaToya Ammons, her 3 children, and her mother, Rosa Campbell. What began as strange noises and unexplained occurrences quickly escalated into something far more sinister, something that would terrify even seasoned investigators and law enforcement officers. The first signs of evil. It started with small disturbances, flickering lights, shadowy figures lurking in the hallways, and the sound of footsteps when no one was there. At first, the family dismissed these occurrences as tricks of the mind. But when LaToya's children began waking up in the middle of the night screaming, claiming to see monstrous figures standing at the foot of their beds, she knew something was terribly wrong. Soon, the disturbances became physical. Rosa reported being pushed, scratched, and even choked by invisible forces. The children began exhibiting strange behaviors. One was found speaking in guttural voices, while another was seen levitating above her bed. The family sought help from their church, hoping that prayer and blessings could drive away the darkness that had taken over their home. A house of horror. The situation worsened when Child Protective Services, CPS, and medical professionals got involved. Reports emerged of the children acting possessed, one of whom allegedly walked up a hospital wall backward in front of multiple witnesses, including doctors and nurses. This event sent shockwaves through the community and drew national attention to the case. LaToya and her family reached out to Father Michael Maginot, a local priest experienced in exorcisms. When he arrived at the house, he immediately sensed an overwhelming, malevolent presence. He performed a series of exorcisms on LaToya, which were documented and carried out with official approval from the Catholic Church. The investigation. The police, intrigued and disturbed by the claims, conducted their own investigation. They took photographs of the home, capturing eerie, shadowy figures that appeared even when the house was empty. Officers who visited the house reported feeling sick, hearing disembodied voices, and even experiencing sudden aggression among themselves. One officer, skeptical at first, left the house only to find himself plagued by nightmares and strange occurrences in his own home. A seasoned detective reported feeling as though something had followed him out of the house, making him physically ill for days. The aftermath. As the story gained media attention, the house became infamous as the Demon House of Gary. Paranormal investigators and journalists flocked to the property, but many left shaken, refusing to return. LaToya and her family ultimately moved away, seeking refuge from whatever dark entity had taken hold of their lives. Years later, paranormal investigator Zach Bagans purchased the house and filmed a documentary about its horrors. However, the experiences reported by his crew were so intense that he eventually had the house demolished, believing it to be a gateway for something truly evil. A mystery that lingers. Though the house no longer stands, the legend of the Demon House remains. To this day, skeptics and believers alike debate the true nature of what happened within its walls. Was it a hoax, mass hysteria, or an actual demonic infestation? Whatever the case, those who lived through it have no doubts. Evil walked among them on Carolina Street.